But if you look at, for instance, the herpes family alone, there's 170 variants.
Wow. Okay.
So that's a crazy number. I mean, and then if your system, for instance, if you have the ones that cause
cold sore, fever, blister.
Sores, fever, all that stuff, that's another one. I mean, there's just so many of them out there. At some point, like we talked about earlier, the immune system is just, I can't handle this.
Hi, it's Haylie Pomroy, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Integrative Medicine Program at the Institute for Neuro-Immune Medicine. I am so thrilled to have you here with us on Hope and Help for Fatigue and Chronic Illness. I've got a very exciting guest today, a dear friend of mine, a colleague, and someone that has been a mentor and really a lifesaver in my own health journey. Dr. Rafael Gonzalez is a PhD from the University of Irvine, specializing in immunology and spinal cord injury. His whole business and practice and life's work has been about restoring the immune system to both a younger state and a healthier state, back into homeostasis. For me, with all of the things that I was dealing with my autoimmune disorder and a lot of the issues that you guys are writing in about, I think this is going to be an incredible episode. Dr. Gonzalez, thank you so much for coming in today. I know you're incredibly busy, but it means everything to our community that you're here.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it, and an honor to actually be here and educate.
It's going to be exciting. We have so many people out there that are talking about regenerative medicine, stem cell therapy, and rebalancing or healing the immune system back into a state of homeostasis or out of crisis even. And so I want to start I'm going to say with the basics for all of us that maybe don't understand how regenerative medicine and immunology, the immune system, how that works together. Can you kind of give me a little bit of a...
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, we look at it more in the context of not only stem cells, but cell therapies in general, because every single cell in the body has, essentially a role. And the immune system is key to health, key to longevity. It's crazy because people don't really think of, the immune system. If you get sick, it's supposed to do its job, and that's it. But you're not even thinking about the immune system plays a role in skin. People that are sick look bad, and it's because of skin. And it plays a role integratively in everything, in the neurological system, in all of it. And understanding how to maintain that health is key. There's so many different things that you can actually do to try to help yourself to maintain, a healthy immune system. So it's a difficult task, though, especially with the challenged society that we're in right now.
So is the crux of regenerative medicine in general, I'm going to pull that term kind of to the table for a second, about reversing age or reversing the age of our immune system or bringing our body back to balance after insult or injury, or all of the above?
It's a little bit of all of it, because you're essentially looking at trying to regenerate or build upon something that wasn't there before. You're trying to heal, and ultimately the body wants to be in homeostasis. It needs to be in homeostasis. We live balance. I mean, just quarter degree temperature rise, drop in our body, and we're off.
Right.
Yeah.
So when we talk about fatigue, oftentimes we talk about like, I'm tired, I get up and I don't have energy. But can we actually have immune system fatigue?
The reason why you feel fatigue is one of two reasons. That's number one. And number two can be also, which is somewhat correlated directly, is a lack of vasculature, a lack of oxygenation to the vital organs.
I'm going to say this again, or I'm going to ask this again, because I think that's big for our community. So we are feeling the symptom of fatigue because our systems are fatigued, our immune system's fatigue, our nervous system, our circulatory system.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yes.
I think sometimes people think we're lazy, or I think sometimes people think I know sleep can play a component, but there's actual systems in our bodies. How are cell therapies, I'm going to back up for a second, because I always want to jump right in and ask about things that maybe pertain to me or my clients or colleagues of mine. But when we talk about cell therapies, can we just dissect that for a minute? What is involved in cell therapy, or what does that umbrella embody?
So essentially what you're doing is using cells. There's various different cell types that you can actually use to make a functional change in the body. And these are simple, like, what do you mean you're using cells? You're basically taking cells, whether it's from somebody else, whether it's from yourself, activating these cells and then putting them back in to cause an endogenous, a change within yourself.
Hey guys, it's Haylie, your host. I wanted to bring to your attention the possibility of coming in and doing a study with us. It is called the COVID-UPP study, and UP stands for Understanding the Post-Viral Phase. You have to be local in South Florida. There are 2 phases of this study. Let me give you the phone number. It's 305-275-5450. And the email is inimresearch@nova.edu. We are currently looking for patients that are dealing with post-COVID, long COVID. We have 2 phases of that study. Please contact us and see if this could be an opportunity for you to get the care and information that you need.
Hola, soy la doctora Ana Palacio, de la Universidad de Miami. Me encantó participar en el podcast de hoy y quería invitarlos a considerar el estudio COVID-UPP. Este estudio está tratando de determinar por qué las personas no mejoran después de COVID. Si les interesa saber más de este estudio, por favor llamen al número 305-275-5450 o pueden escribir al email inimresearch@nova.edu. Les agradezco mucho su interés y nos vemos la próxima vez.
So sometimes we take our own cells out of our body?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And then do we grow them? Do we mature them?
We grow them.
Okay. And do we identify like healthy cells or specific types of cells?
Correct. So for instance, in the context of something that we do with natural killer cell, which is part of the innate or the immediate immune response, is we would take, blood from you. We then purify that particular cell and activate it, because as you age, it just becomes a signaler, not an attacker, not a killer. And unfortunately, this particular cell is in charge of, mutated cells, in charge of virus, which we definitely have to get in a lot more detail about.
Right.
And in charge of a senescent cell. Senescent cell, people don't know what the hell is a senescent cell. It's getting a lot of craze now because this is essentially a zombie cell that's in your body. And in the context of the immune system, it's floating around in the immune system and it's doing nothing but causing havoc. That havoc can help a virus come in and integrate a lot better. That havoc can actually cause mutated, more formations of mutated cells and exhaust the system in general.
So I'm going to take it back a step because I get so excited about these things that I just want to ask a million questions. But if an individual is dealing with chronic fatigue or POTS, is it important that we look at the immune system as the first way to diagnose this? I mean, so many people are getting, diagnosed without really looking at what's going on within the body. So should we be looking at the immune system?
100%, and in a lot more detail to try to understand, because the cases are different. For instance, we'll talk about individuals with long COVID, which both of them are somewhat mimicked,
right?
And with chronic fatigue syndrome. And what you'll see one of 2 things is the immune system normally is exhausted because it's tapped by all these different viruses. In the context of COVID, you've now basically introduced something else in. It's essentially like your immune system, let's just say, is a UFC fighter.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, one other UFC fighter comes in, you can handle it with no problems. Let's say that's virus 1. And then another one comes in, you can handle it no problems, that's virus 2. But now you've taken COVID and brought it in, and that's 3 fighters against that immune system. Plus, we're just talking about viruses. Remember, you have daily exposure to bacteria.
Molds.
Yeah, molds.
Yep, absolutely.
All of this stuff. So at some point, it's trying to fight. It's in a cage trying to fight so many different things that it's virtually impossible. And it becomes exhausted and it gives up.
Right.
And then the profile changes. The profile, I've seen individuals that test, it's one of 2 things, is the chronic inflammatory response is on overdrive, or the complete opposite.
It goes into exhaustion.
Yeah, the exhaustion, or actually, you'll be surprised, there's just a consistent healing response, which is an anti-inflammatory response that's trying to do something. But the problem is that there has to be a balance of both. That inflammatory response has to be efficient to wipe out. Then the healing response has to come in and be efficient, There's what's called a regulatory system. The regulatory system is key to all of this.
So people are out there, they're seeing their doctor and they don't feel well, or they're having extended symptoms. And I will say, I do think with all the work that we've done in the past on ME/CFS, that it has really allowed us to leapfrog into some of the COVID long hauler trials and studies. And we know how to look at the panels, right? Because we kind of see that underlying syndrome, if you will. All these people are out there struggling right now. And what types of labs would you have them run to see if the way that they're creating, growing, replicating their cells is not in a positive homeostasis?
I mean, simple things that they're not simple because they're not available everywhere. And unless you talk about them, you're not going to get them.
So ask for them.
Yeah, ask for them. Essentially, looking at there's these proteins that are designed to target and activate specific cells. These are called cytokines. And look at these because there's pro-inflammatory ones, there's regulatory ones, there's anti-inflammatory ones. Those are probably key to give you an idea of what's transpiring in the immune system. That's one. And then specializing in looking at subsets of immune cells of what's going on, because if your natural killer cells are exhausted or they're gone, you're not going to have an immediate immune response. And then there's no translation to that bigger adaptive response.
Right. So people, that are coming in and they're having these chronic symptoms, I think a lot of times they're not seeing immunologists and virologists or even hematologists, right? People that look at the blood specifically. Yeah. They're seeing maybe, hopefully, at least an internal medicine doc. But if they're out there and they're struggling, it's good to get this workup and these panels run to see what's off. And the cytokines, I mean, that we were just looking at a bunch of those with a couple patients yesterday. And it's fascinating what the immune system does. I'm going to back up a little bit. Talk to me about when we talk about doing cell therapies, is this something that we can do outpatient in a doctor's office? Is this still in a research space? It's in a research setting.
Clinical studies. We actually have 2 clinical studies. We just finished a COVID study, which we're now translating it actually into a long haulers / chronic fatigue syndrome study. And then we have another one that's an autoimmune disease study, which is polymyositis, dermatomyositis with lung involvement. They're somewhat similar because we talked about earlier, our focus is restoring the immune system or regulating the immune system. Based on what we've seen from the phase 1 studies, one important thing that we can do with the particular, what's called an umbilical cord lining stem cell that we actually use, is regulate the system. You basically have a new pool of cells that are coming out on a regular basis in the immune system with these T cells. Those are basically your full army that do everything. And in some instances, they remain naive and they don't know what to do. One of the most important aspects of what we do is when we put these cells in, they can regulate, that naive T cell response by basically taking them and changing them to a regulatory T cell. So now that regulatory T cell can actually do one important thing. Tell the T cell, the whole entire repertoire of T cells you have in your system, I need a better pro-inflammatory response, or I need a better anti-inflammatory healing response. I need to regulate the system.
So in an individual that has an autoimmune disorder or is in hyperimmune or an inflammatory disorder, stem cells specifically are more regulatory. Like I had that happen to me. So when I did cells, thank you, and I went to Mexico, having an autoimmune disorder and being in an extreme inflammatory state, it helped to regulate it. So my immune system was no longer out of balance. My immune system was no longer in a hyper state, if you will. Is that stem cell specific, mesenchymal stem cells, or I'm gonna ask you some specifics about stem cells, but was that because of the stem cells specifically?
It's because it ultimately depends on, everybody who's heard the term stem cells out there.
I'm gonna have you clarify some of this for me.
Yeah,
for
correct.
Sure.
I mean, people talk in the United States of I get stem cells. Oh, it's stem cells this, it's stem cells that. It can be just ground up tissue and they're calling it stem cells. That's somewhat nonsense. It can be from a donation of an amniotic fluid, those are stem cells. That's also nonsense. We talk about taking cells in the context of purifying a stem cell, culture expanding them on a petri dish, growing them up, doing a significant amount of testing because you have to submit to the FDA what's called a chemical manufacturing composition. It's sort of like a drug log of exactly what you have built and what you have done to show there's a full safety profile, all the testing you've done. That's what we're talking about. And then they're all different because ultimately it boils down to how you actually grow them up, believe it or not, the diet that you actually feed them.
Right. Well, that's the diet that you actually feed every human being and every living.
We need to talk about that.
Yeah, every living species, whether it's plant, animal, in the sky. Okay, so I'm just going to keep taking it back because my mind goes a million places. So when our bodies are, whether it's, again, POTS or a pro-inflammatory state or chronic fatigue, I mean, the research is showing that this could be a really promising therapy to re-regulate a body that has gone way out of homeostasis or has had so many, we call it hormetic events, so many stress events, whether it's viral or chemical or environmental, medicine, or nutrient depleted. These hormetic events have gotten the body into a new state of homeostasis that's not healthy. So they're stuck, right? We have a lot of people that say, I'm not necessarily getting worse, but I'm definitely not getting better. And my body, this is the new norm for me. So when we talk about cell therapies, and I'm going to just pull stem cells for a second, the goal there is to help the body modulate the immune system more effectively.
Correct.
Okay. And that's why we've seen such positive effect with chronic inflammatory states, as well as in my situation, more in the autoimmune space. Yeah.
Yes,
it's been amazing in the autoimmune space.
That's actually one part, but then you also think of it, another thing that these, the cells that we use, we know do, is increase blood flow, increase vasculature. And that's actually really important too, because as we age, heart attack, stroke, occlusions of limbs, et cetera, the vasculature is diminished.
And it's also how every nutrient, we're 100% nutrient dependent. Every thought, every action, every motion is nutrient dependent, and the vascular system is the delivery system.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's critical. We are seeing with COVID long hauler a lot of endothelial cell wall, a lot of pro-inflammatory response, inflammation in the vascular system.
Yes.
And younger men, younger women, I mean, we're getting 20-year-olds that are coming in with the inability to regulate blood pressure, fatigue, dizziness, vertigo. It's been an interesting process to watch. Your company specifically is RESTEM, correct?
Correct.
We have had such a great relationship working with you. It's been amazing. I want to just call out a couple things. With this company specifically, you talked about how the cells are cultivated, because there is a lot about stem cells right now.
Yes.
Will you take me through what sets your company apart, why we work with you and why we've had the relationship with you?
Yeah, well, we published a paper, probably about 2007. We started trying to understand what is in a better adult stem cell. Adult stem cell is post-birth tissue. And you normally can get, of course, if you think about it, the younger the cell, the better. And what we try to look at was, what people don't understand is that, well, if you got a cell from an umbilical cord, but then if you take it and you culture it, you grow this thing up, you are artificially aging it.
Wow. Okay.
So when I take a stem cell, for instance, you can get stem cells from us, from fat, from bone marrow.
So you can get stem cells from your own body.
From your own body. Okay. But those stem cells are just as old as you are. Then once
and just as functional as I am.
Well, yeah, whatever inherent problems. Whatever inherent problems
absolutely.
you have, those cells actually have it. And when you look at, for instance, when people say, well, I got stem cells and they took it from bone marrow, the population of stem cells is basically like, you're fishing for a tuna in a sea of barracuda when there's only one tuna and there's over 1 million barracuda in there.
Got it.
So you're trying to catch one.
And that's when we use
that's
bone marrow.
Bone marrow. That's in bone marrow. In fat, it's a little bit more, it's probably 10 tuna in 1 million barracuda, something like that. There's more. But ultimately what it boils down to is the ability to take that cell and then expand it, grow it up, culture it to hundreds of millions of cells. That's when you have a pure population of stem cells. That's what we do. The other biggest ticket for us was actually going back and understanding the various different diets that we put on the cells. And that's what distinguishes us significantly. And then also the genetic component. It's sort of crazy how when we first started doing this for the clinical studies, we went over collecting over 50 different cord tissue with donations. And we started analyzing, number one, age, number two, time from the time that we get from birth, time we get the tissue, and then growing these cells up until they've become exhausted, because even stem cells become exhausted.
Right.
And looking at the genetic components of it. And what was crazy is, we would always think, hey, we have a superstar line here. This thing grows fantastically well. It's maintaining a youthful appearance, phenotype. It's maintaining a youthful genotype, the features of it. And what we found is every once in a while, we would see all of a sudden, boom, an aberration, meaning something genetic, a genetic deficiency. We'd have to go back, test again, and then we would go confirm it. We'd go reach out to the parent and tell the parent, there's a deficiency here. You need to test. Is there a deficiency within your family? And 100% of the time, I have an extra X chromosome. I have this.
Wow.
I have that. Although I'm not a dominant, a genotype. I'm a recessive genotype. So and then we go back and they'd go back and test baby, and we know that there's a problem. So that has to be discarded. So that limits the amount of what you can use. Not only that, we went even further with the cells that we have, and we made sure, which we'd have to talk about probably, is the individuals that donated them were free of cytomegalovirus and free of Epstein-Barr virus. That now eliminates 85% of the patient world population. Just to make sure that we don't have any issue, that we have to do more testing, more of any of this. Is that
required for everybody that provides a cell therapy? Or because I've always, before I was fortunate to get to work with you. We had gone to Moscow with a patient to receive cell therapy. We had been out of the country, many different things. And then I realized, and this was, decades ago, I realized that it's really important where you get your cell therapy from. Yeah. It's critically important. And it's
not required.
It's not required.
No, it's not required. Yikes. Actually, cytomegalovirus, like I said, 85% of the patient population. People talk about stem cells I got stem cells, and then it's from, every single baby is completely different. There's really no consistency in, gathering tissue from one, tissue from another, tissue from another. And they can all have cytomegalovirus. They can all have
And it's
EBV.
Transmitted during pregnancy. That's correct. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a concern, with it there. A lot of people concern themselves now with transmission of COVID and the vaccine and this, that. It's ours were prior to anything COVID wise.
Right.
All the viral testing was, negative, completely negative, including the donors, like I said, are free, clear of cytomegalovirus and Epstein-Barr virus, which is a hard find.
It is. That's what's going to. How'd you find that? Yeah. Okay. So I'm aware that you're doing a lot of different trials. Can we talk a little bit about, where the trials are happening and what types of individuals are in those trials, and maybe some also that you're looking forward to doing in the future?
Yeah. So we could start off with trial one. Our first study, which we started in 2019, was polymyositis dermatomyositis, which is essentially an autoimmune disease. It's considered an orphan. There's not that many people that have this affected, that your own immune system attacks and targets muscle and skin.
Got it.
And eventually these patients end up succumbing to not necessarily the discomfort of that, but actually to pulmonary fibrosis, because then it starts to target and attack the lung
tissue.
Yeah, the lung tissue. And this is what they succumb to, is that. So it's sort of a really, really slow, it could be slow or it could actually be quick. I could say a slow, probably painful death. I don't have it, so I don't really know, but I've heard from patients that have it.
Right.
The difficulties, of it. And then these individuals, to keep it under control, some of them are complete non-responders, meaning you can give them anything you can want. You can give them a biologic,
they're on prednisone, they're on CellCept, they're on Imurin, autoimmune.
Some of them are completely non-responsive. Others are responsive, yet you have now immune suppressed them. When you immune suppress anybody, you now put them susceptible to number one, cancer,
Right.
of course, because the immune system can't recognize a mutated cell. And then number two is flu. If you talk to these people, they're consistently sick. I was just talking to somebody the other day about this, somebody that's on CellCept and on
I was on CellCept, Imurin, prednisone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you catch everything.
Yep, and you get
Absolutely.
everything correct because there's no immune system,
Right.
basically.
So these trials are using cell therapies as an adjunct therapy to help, or as a primary therapy, maybe either or, to help re-regulate the immune system that's gotten out of balance.
Correct. Yeah, that's number one. And for instance, in our phase 1 study, what we found, which is pretty neat, was that we can actually lower, all the patients. I think the majority of all the patients were on prednisone steroid,
Right.
which essentially long term is really, really bad for
Yes.
you. It's going to destroy the liver. It's going to destroy the kidneys,
The gut.
and the gut,
Yeah.
all of it. And what we found is some of them we were able to get off steroids. Some of them we were able to taper down significantly. Even tapering down can actually increase your quality of life.
Absolutely.
And help your immune system.
Absolutely. That's exciting. I mean,
Yeah.
again, I was able to utilize the therapies. I feel very, very fortunate. I want to ask you, because I have you here, why are we seeing such a similarity between our COVID long hauler and our ME/CFS, our chronic fatigue, myalgic encephalomyelitis? Like, why are those patients showing such a similarity, even in their cytokines? Like you said, the labs being run, in their immune modulation, in the way they're. It's a gift in a way, because we've done so much research in this space. And then we get hit with this pandemic and we go, okay, at least we know how to, first of all, believe the patient.
Yeah.
But what is going on there? Is there a viral component? What are we seeing?
It is a viral component. COVID was a mess, but for chronic fatigue syndrome patients, it was sort of a blessing in disguise. Because, eventually before it was just like discarded, you're tired,
Right.
you don't have anything, there's
Discounted,
nothing going
you're
on.
gaslit.
Correct, yes,
It was
correct,
just, yeah,
and that's about it.
medical gaslighting.
But then here comes, long haulers, and they start studying that, and they now see that, wait a second, this is something that is a legitimate issue.
Right.
And it's a big issue. And ultimately, it all boils down to over-viral burden.
Right. Okay.
So, you're consistently with, for instance, those that have cytomegalovirus, which is common, Epstein-Barr virus, other forms. It's crazy. I mean, if I talked about this last week in a talk I gave, is people don't understand, how many viruses are there out there? There's 7,000 known viruses
and that's what we know so far.
That's what we know so
Right.
far. They talk about there's over 1 million of them. But if you look at, for instance, the herpes family alone, there's 170 variants.
Wow. Okay.
So that's a crazy number. I mean, and then if your system, for instance, if you have the ones that cause
cold sore, fever,
cold
blister,
sores, fever, all
Right.
that stuff, that's another one.
Chicken
there's
pox.
Just,
Yeah.
there's just so many of them out there. At some point, like we talked about earlier, the immune system is just, I can't handle this.
So I can't tell you how many people with ME/CFS or chronic fatigue, diagnosis, that they've never had a viral panel. Like, they come into our clinic and they have never had a viral panel. That shocked me. Now we're seeing COVID long hauler. I mean, patients that are flying in and they've never had a cytokine and a viral panel. It blows my mind.
Yep.
Because in research, the research, the papers, the literature is already out there fast.
Yeah.
Talk to me about using cell therapies with I know that you've done some work with individuals that are struggling with COVID.
Yeah.
The residual effects.
We started off doing, sort of like the Hail Mary when COVID first came in, which at Baptist Hospital we had quite a bit of success with.
These were patients that were hospitalized with
These
COVID.
were patients that were intubated.
Intubated.
I mean,
okay.
they were.
It was not looking well.
Not looking well. You're on your way out, most likely. And we had some success there. But the good thing about that study, which is no longer the case in that many patients as such, was that we were able to recognize when somebody was that severe, what are these cells? All right, what are they actually doing?
What's actually happening?
And for instance, and when we looked at particularly some proteins that activate the immune system, some of these, chronic inflammatory proteins were crazy high.
Right. Thousands of times.
It was crazy. Like, we looked at CXCL10, and it's one of the regulators of your pro-inflammatory T cell response. And it was outrageously high. We were like, well, what's going on here? It's just like the immune system just going sort
crazy.
of berserk.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, there was no stop. There was no break.
Yeah. And you just basically had to regulate it. And then we saw post-treatment how this thing would drop significantly, and it would somewhat become regulated. And then some other growth factors there that would actually become regulated in the body too. It gave us the ability to understand a little bit better what we have.
And the research was in real time. I mean, it was at the bedside.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't an animal model. That was what was amazing for me to watch in that process. So now the application for those that can't modulate their immune system back into a healthy homeostasis post viral infection. Sometimes we're seeing that the virus itself hasn't cleared. I mean, they're finding residual COVID-19 viruses in the stool. They're doing all kinds of interesting biopsies. They're seeing an activation of secondary viruses, like you said, CMV, EBV. And so cell therapies go in and help the immune system reconcile the trauma. Is that a way to kind of think of it?
Help regulate the immune system or strengthen the immune system to actually help the patient. Not necessarily, you're not getting rid of the virus. The virus is always going to be there.
Well, but your own immune system
own immune system can now target it, keep it in bay, keep it in check. And, for instance, if you look at those that had chicken pox when we were younger, and then we get shingles as we're older.
Right.
I'm one of those. And if you look at what transpires, you normally get shingles when you're stressed, when your immune system it's a complete opportunistic virus.
Yes.
It hides, just chills out, and then all of a sudden it comes at bay when your immune system is slightly weakened and it's going to do something. The problem with long haulers is you're consistently there.
You're consistently on immune alert.
Yep.
And that, just the thought of that makes me fatigued. I mean, so the nervous system's fatigued, the circulatory system's fatigued. There's pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory hormones that are out of balance.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. The immune modulation in the stem cells, there's another cell that we talk a lot about, which is the killer cells. And your company also works extensively with natural killer cells.
Correct.
Can those go in and help lower a viral load on a person struggling?
It's one of their primary responses. So one of their primary responses is actually to go after and kill virus.
Okay.
Secondarily mutated cells. And then the other thing is that senescent cell, that zombie cell. If you think of your system, if you've got a bunch of zombies in your system, how is the immune system going to function appropriately?
Right.
But if those are removed and those are eliminated, it now gives your bone marrow the signal to actually come out and produce these new cells and actually go out and say, okay, I have a healthy immune system now. You remember, the body wants to be in consistent homeostasis. The body knows you have a certain amount of cells. If these cells are just occupying space and causing havoc, there's no way that the bone marrow that's ready to rock and roll to produce these new progenitor cells, these new young cells again, that can come out and do the right thing.
Well, and there's the other thing that was fascinating to me is how our adrenals, and our adaptogenic hormones correlate with the production of those cells. So the more stressed and fatigued and exhausted, so let's say we're not feeling well and we can't go back to work, or we're not feeling well and it's difficult to take care of the kids, or we're not feeling well and we're not, available for partnership, that stress response also suppresses the body's immune response. So it's this really vicious cycle with it. How do people participate in your trials? How do people, we want to recruit as effectively individuals that can start to receive these types of therapies. How do people get in contact with you?
So normally you would just go to restem.com, and then you can submit an inquiry about getting into one of the clinical studies. We're hoping to be starting within the next 3 to 6 months our phase 2 study for chronic fatigue syndrome / long haulers, polymyositis, dermatomyositis study, which is going to be a large scale study with 10 different centers. Starting that within the next 3 to 6 months too. So just essentially reaching out to restem.com.
That's exciting.
And then we, hopefully we can help.
So thank you so much. And I for me, it was life-saving. I mean, I had been, all my life with ITP. Hematological oncologists were my best friends, right? Immunology, that's why I got into this space. And I do work so hard on my nutrition and my lifestyle and stress reduction. It was such a breath of life to have my immune system re-regulated. I mean, it was, and we look at my labs and we see my labs, and it's not, I would be happy even if I just felt as good as I feel, but to have my labs improve, to have my labs normalize for me.
100%. Yeah.
Was shocking. It's been a wonderful experience for me. And I wish that to be available in the States for people. And the only way we're going to have it available in the States is by your research. So I
moving it forward, progressing it. But there's also, I mean, if you think of, probably we're out there and we're talking about cell therapies, and people out there are going to be like, well, wait a second, I have to wait 3 to 6 months to get into a clinical study. And then how often do you do? I discuss a lot of times, which is things that you do too, is trying to take the baby steps, but unfortunately taking the baby steps and sort of figuring out what little things make you feel a little better. I'm a big opponent of baby steps such as grounding.
Yes.
People don't quite understand that if you just go and put your feet in dirt or the sand for 30 to 45 minutes, guess what? You increase nitric oxide production. That increases blood flow to the vital organs. It gives your immune system a circulatory chance to try to do what it needs to do. Breathing techniques help with the lung. Simple, something like Wim Hof, 11 minutes of your time in the morning of doing this.
I garden, absolutely. Gardening.
All of these type of things, just find the niche, the little thing that'll make you even feel a little bit better, that are things that you can do at home that are easy, that you just have to incorporate regularly, before you get this. Because ultimately, we talk about pulling the whole package together, because if you don't help yourself and diet,
yes,
there's nothing more important than what you put in your mouth.
That's what I say.
Oh my God,
people say food is like medicine. I say no, food is medicine. And food should be the first line of defense in any medical condition. And it's usually people consider it a luxury, but it's not only life affirming, it's life sustaining. And if you're in a situation where your immune system or the viruses have gotten out of control, none of it is going to work without addressing that. And it's very exciting to me that people like you really recognize that.
100%. I mean, I was at the American Academy for Anti-Aging, their yearly conference in Vegas, and I get in an Uber, and the gentleman asked me, are you here, which you'll know this and you'll appreciate it, are you here for that anti-aging thing, or are you here for the cowboy show? And I said, I'm here for that anti-aging
I'm here for
thing.
both. I was there for both.
You were there for both. You were there for both. So he asked me, he said, oh, wow, that's interesting. You talk really, really briefly about some of the stuff I do. I'm going to go there and lecture. And then he says, well, this was a guy he was obese, Uber driver. And then he asked me the question that I really never thought about was, well, what's something easy and the most important thing that you think that I can do to basically help with aging, because I'm 50 years old?
I want to know what you think it is, and I'll tell you what I think it is. What did you tell him?
You know what? I had to think about it for about 30 seconds, and what I told him was what you put in your mouth.
Yes, absolutely.
I told him and he said, really? He's like, what do you mean what I put in my mouth? I said, the food and the supplementation that you put in your mouth on a daily basis. And then he started asking me about, well, was you saying diet? And I said, yes, your nutrition, what you're taking in. Sometimes you don't absorb the correct way. Sometimes a vegetarian diet may be for you, it may not be for you. A carnivore diet may be for you, it may not be for somebody else. Everybody is different, but you have to find what works with you, and what, you try something for a week, you try it for 2 weeks. Everybody's
body's so different. And I think what you just said about the power of what you put in your mouth, if we could recognize there is no scientific evidence that doesn't say that what I'm going to say is exactly true, right? What we put in our mouth either promotes health or it depletes health. There is nothing we put in our mouth that keeps everything the same. Because as we engage with a nutrient, our bodies have to integrate it into our genetic makeup, right? And make it our tissue, our hormones, our thoughts, our reactivity, our ability to contract and relax muscles. So there is, and we don't utilize those nutrients that we consume at that moment. We have to exchange nutrients from where we have nutrients stored. So when you put food in, or a beverage in, a sports drink in, it is either promoting health or it is depleting health. It is not neutral, because it makes our bodies secrete hormones enzymes, washes receptor sites. It is not, you cannot get away with having something and say, I'm going to stay the same. We are aging. We are responding every second of every day. And all of that is nutrient dependent.
Yep.
So choose wisely when you open your mouth. That's what I always tell everybody.
100%. And people do not understand when you consume, I love pizza. When you consume that slice of pizza, that one slice may be okay. But now when you've gone into 2 and 3 slices, your metabolic function goes into overdrive and you are aging yourself.
And I will
and you're
say,
tapping your immune system actually too, believe it or not.
Absolutely. You said you love pizza. I will say joy stimulates the immune system and it stimulates the metabolism. So love what you eat. Don't eat unconsciously.
Overeating and eating too much.
Or feeling guilty about what you eat, or feeling, people eat and they have remorse. I said, no, whatever you're going to eat, look at it, embrace it, have a conversation with it. If it's going to, like I always say, if a margarita falls into your mouth, do so with joy and pleasure. Don't hide in the closet, but recognize that the body has to utilize its resources if you're on slice 3 of pizza in order to get back into homeostasis after that insult.
That's why you feel sick.
Yeah.
Is when you're this is all messed up from those 3 slices of pizza. And then all of a sudden your head's all messed up because of the neural gut axis.
Right.
And you feel horrible. And it's actually similar if you think about it in long haulers, is the people not understanding that you don't feel well already and your immune system is tapped and you have a virus on overdrive. Now what you've done is, guys, 60% of the immune system is in the gut.
Right.
And you've eaten something that's incorrectly. Now you've even tapped it even worse.
Right.
And you're going to feel neurologically worse. You're going to feel exhausted.
Right.
You're not going to feel well.
And it's so hard because when you don't feel well, it's just our society. In order to eat healthy, you have to make effort. There's nothing that's served up for us. We're going to run down to the cafeteria. There's nothing that's served up to us that's going to promote health, that's quick, cheap, readily available.
Yeah.
So it takes effort, right? And in an exhausted body, any effort is too much.
Yep.
And so I think what I tell people is, make sure you're using organic fruits. The higher up the food chain, go organic, right? If you're using beef and beef isn't consuming organic fruits and vegetables, it compiles, it exacerbates, it adds, it conjugates, it adds to the system more and more and more the more they're eating, and that happens. So those are great tips. I just want to draw back really quick, as I know your time's super valuable. What in the world got you into this?
It's a great question. I was in the military originally. I always had in the back of my mind, I was in the Army. I wanted to go back to school and study medicine, some form of medicine. I injured my back and I decided to go into research on the spine. And originally I was actually I really got into physical therapy, into maintaining shape. I ran like crazy when I was in the Army and really trying to maintain shape. I was all gung-ho with the physical therapy, trying to go the physical therapy route. And then just fell in love with research, with all things of research. And then my focus was looking at all my fellow researchers where, they're consistently doing research. And I was like, I want to do research, but I want to do translational research from bench to bedside. I want to be able to help the masses if I can help the masses and find ways to help the masses. And then from there, essentially, it just took off. I found my purpose. I found my passion. I found what I love to do. I really, really, and I know you enjoy this too, is troubleshooting hard issues with patients when they come to you and they've exhausted, going everywhere and they don't know what to do. And, if you can improve one life out of 10, you've done a phenomenal job. That's something I consistently preach. And even if I can improve you 10% of where you were before, you're only 10% better. It's still a betterment. It can change your entire
trajectory of your life. Yeah, absolutely. First, thank you for your service.
Yes.
You know how important veterans are to everybody, but especially to us at the Institute. We have a very strong passion. But thank you also for your work in research. We're fortunate, and people ask me, why do I get crazy cases? And I always feel like it's because people were so empathetic and supportive to me when I was struggling. in my health. And there is an aspect of paying it forward, but I think it also has kind of life work to try to shorten the gap between, when I was in health crisis to being in a health victory personally. And it's people like you that shorten that gap for people like me. And that means everything. And I know that everybody out there, that if you're struggling, we're here to provide resources and solutions. And so I know you're going to get inundated with people with questions, but I just really appreciate what you're doing in research. We talk about translational research. Isn't it so rewarding when we see therapies impact people, real people's lives right away? Yeah.
Yeah, it is 100%. It is. Like, I mean, just that one person that, when I see that one person that tells me, we just finished a phase 1 heart failure study. We're talking about going into phase 2. It went really well. We just published a paper in the Journal of Heart and Lung Transplantation on it. And it went really well. And when we see, for instance, heart failure patients that are on a transplant list.
Right.
And, the transplant list can take forever. They might not make that transplant list because they're going to pass.
Right.
And if we can change them from being, what's called a class 4 heart failure transplant patient to a class 2 or a class 1 where their ejection fraction was, I've had a case of a patient whose ejection fraction was 16. People don't understand. That person can barely bend down and tie their shoelaces.
Yes.
And then now that individual is out there playing golf. It's night and day. You haven't cured them, but you've helped their quality of life significantly.
Yeah. And we had one, same thing with the ejection fraction.
Yeah.
And they were on oxygen, not participating in life. And they're doing things right now that actually scare me. They're like going out and out in the ocean and swimming and paddleboarding, and it is for me. It changed my life. There's, like you said, the little things. Being able to have children. That's a big thing. That was huge for me because I'm not supposed to have that with ITP, right? Yeah. But just not being at the oncologist, getting my labs taken every 4 weeks. That's massive.
Yep.
It's massive.
Yeah, it's a change.
Yeah, there's just a change. So. I want you back. I need to talk more about viruses. We have a lot to talk about in that group in general. What I wanted to do was bring the concept of quality, science-based, research-based cell therapies and how it's changing the trajectory of medicine right now. It's exciting for us at the Institute, and working with you is always such an honor and a privilege. So I thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
We'll talk later. We'll talk more.
Yes.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.